Hi there, just read this disclaimer please.
Hey guys, how's it going? So you might remember this video a while back when I talked about my LISA and how even though the money's locked up until I'm 60, I can still make it work and make it benefit me, and at some point in that video I said this. I just never got a SIPP because I never wanted to wait until I was 55 to work. So I haven't got one, so I don't want the faff. I'm now kind of coming back and just thinking about whether I still feel like that. I'm wondering whether maybe it's worth the effort, the administration effort, to do a similar thing as I do with the LISA with a SIPP as well. So I've just been I've spent the past couple of hours sort of learning about SIPPs because I always thought they weren't suitable for me, so I never even bothered to learn about how they work. So I've watched a couple of YouTube videos, read a bit about it online, and I think I've got an understanding of how they work. What I'd really like is for you guys to listen to me talk through my plan and tell me if I have understood it properly or not, because I'm not 100% sure that I've understood every nuance here at all, because like I say, I've only put a couple of hours into it, so I don't know whether I have understood it properly. So my understanding of SIPPs are that even though I'm retired and I don't earn any money, I can still contribute into a SIPP £2,880, and HMRC will top that up to 3,600, so 720 quid. And you can keep doing that until you're age 75 apparently. And you can even do that once you start withdrawing from the SIPP at age 57, which, as you'll see in a second, I've assumed age 60, because I feel like at some point it's going to rise again. It's already risen 2 years from 55 to 57. Well, actually, it's not gone through yet, has it? But they're trying to raise it to 57. And at some point, I reckon possibly it might go up to 60. So in my calculations, I've put in that as a worst case scenario. I believe how it works. And when you withdraw the money from the SIPP, what I've learnt here, you can take 25% of it tax-free, and then the 75% gets taxed. So if for instance all of my other wealth is wrapped up in ISAs, the LISA and the ISA, that means that I should be able to withdraw the whole tax allowance each year from the SIPP without paying any tax. And I think there's two different ways you can do it here. Option 2 is not for me, because that's buying an annuity, which is not something I would ever envisage doing. Option 1, you can take the whole 25% at the beginning and then withdraw the rest taxable for the rest of your life. Or you can do option 3, and each time you take a bit of money out of your SIPP, it's like doing it piecemeal. So you can take 25% tax-free, 75% gets taxed. So you can basically the lumps, the 25% tax-free can either be done in one go or piecemeal, as and when you withdraw. So the first thing that I've done here is I've just done some numbers just to make sure that what I have left outside of the SIPP and the LISA, because the SIPP and LISA I can't access till I'm 60, in my head anyway. So I need to make sure that what I have outside of those two accounts will last me until I'm age 60, because otherwise I'll be in trouble, won't I? So what I've done here is I've done the unitisation I lasted on the 11th of November. So I've just done a very rough estimate, similar to spreadsheets I've shown before. The amount that's outside of the LISA and the SIPP is that amount. Is it? So it's basically these two accounts. Sum 369, yeah. I've added the returns, subtracted how much I'm spending, because all of the spending will have to come from outside of the LISA and the SIPP in these intervening years, because I can't take anything out of these two. I've also subtracted how much I'm going to be paying into the LISA and how much I'm going to be paying into the SIPP. You'll notice the LISA stops at age 50 because they're the rules. The SIPP stops at age, that's not right, 75. I've put in the investment returns, year zero spend, and how much my spending would rise by, and I've kind of plugged in the numbers there. And as you can see, with these assumptions, 6% returns, spending 13 grand a year, spending rises by 3%. The money at age 60 when I can access the LISA and the SIPP, plenty of money there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to try and put in a worst case scenario. Spend 2 grand extra a year. Returns go down to 4%. How are we looking? So I'm still a couple of years in the green, or whatever the phrase is. Maybe I could spend 16 grand. I'm just trying to put in a worst case scenario just to stress test this. I'm still going till age 62, so maybe I'll go... This is going to well and truly ruin it. Oh no, there we go. So that's kind of a worst case scenario for the money that's outside of the age restricted access accounts. So I could have as bad results as that. I could have everything breaking on my car, etc. That means I have to spend 16 grand a year instead of 13. And my returns could be as low as 3% over the next 17 years. Sorry, 19 years. So I think on that front, I'm probably okay. What will definitely happen is that I will be withdrawing from the ISA sooner than I would have done otherwise. Because this is the only cash that's not in an ISA at the moment. And that I will be withdrawing 20,000 will be going into the ISA, or the two different ISAs, and then 2,880 will be going into the SIPP. So it'll be 22,880. It'll only be under 6 years. Well, there's growth, obviously it'll grow as well. But if there was no growth, it would only be 6 years. So 19 years worth, even with the growth, even if the value of the funds grew, I'm pretty sure this will go down to zero by the time I get to age 60. Well, before I get to the age of 60, I would guess. So I would be withdrawing from the ISA sooner. So now let's look at the numbers of how much it might make me by going for the SIPP. So what I've done here is I've kind of simulated what might happen. I've got the SIPP value in year one as being 3,600 because that's the first year's contribution. And then after in a year's time, it'll make returns. I've put in returns there in that cell. Withdrawals start when I'm age 60, as you can see there. So obviously the value grows, and then at age 60 I can start withdrawing from it. But whilst I'm withdrawing, I'm also contributing, which is a bit odd. And the amount I've put in there to withdraw, currently the tax allowance is 12,500 before you start paying any tax. So I figure in 19 years' time, it should be at least 14,000, you'd hope. So I've put 14,000, I've multiplied by 4 over 3 because the first 25% is tax-free anyway. So that means that 75% of my withdrawal will be 14 grand. And it should be tax-free. Obviously that number is hard to predict. So I'm withdrawing that amount each year, and obviously the value goes down and down and down. Now this spreadsheet isn't sophisticated enough to do this sum properly. So what I need to do, at 6% returns that I've got there, what I need to do is modify these numbers of the withdrawal manually to make it work. So if I do that now, I'll pause the video. Okay, right, so a bit of trial and error, and I've got the numbers right now. So in this scenario of making 6% returns and making full contributions, these will be the withdrawals that would get me to perfectly, so at the age of 75, which is the last year you can make the contribution and get the 720 quid from HMRC. I will be perfectly getting myself back down to zero and closing the SIPP account, so I can stop having the charges that are associated with that account. And then but then obviously the higher the returns, the more of a waste it becomes, because you don't make, because from years. So for an example, let's go up to 8% returns. No, let's go crazy. Let's go for 10% returns. Never going to happen. It then leaves you with a much higher amount. So withdrawing the full amount without paying any tax is required for longer. Well, might be required forever, actually, looking at this. Yeah, it's required all the way up to age 96. And what that means is all of the charges that the SIPP provider charges me are just a loss, because previously it was made up for by the 720 quid here. And these charges are charges that I wouldn't be paying otherwise, because otherwise they'd just be in my iWeb account, which doesn't have a custody fee. There's no monthly amount. But when the charges are in the SIPP there's always charges. Now, I mean, I haven't put much thought into this, but the two accounts I'm considering are AJ Bell and Free Trade. So if I unhide these columns, I've calculated the costs for AJ Bell and Free Trade. Free Trade is simple, it's just 120 quid a year. AJ Bell is a percentage up to 120, then plus about a tenner for each trade. So if I traded once a year, and then when I'm withdrawing, I'll trade twice a year, perhaps. Although actually, that might just be once a year anyway. Not sure, because I'd be selling all the time, wouldn't I? Yeah, let's just set that to 1. So as you can see, in all of these years, when there's no benefit happening, I've put here the bonus minus the costs. And the profit goes from a few hundred, nearly 600, down to losing 129. So it becomes loss-making. So there's a bit of a risk. So, I mean, at some point, you might be better off paying a little bit of income tax. So making this number higher earlier on and paying a bit of income tax just to get the account down to zero quicker. But then, I don't know. Maybe it's worth just paying that. I don't know. But if we go to more reasonable numbers, let's go to 8%. It gets us down only a few years after you're making the contribution. You're down to zero. So it's only age 81, so it'll be 6 years after the age of 75 where you'll be able to close the account without having paid any tax. And the profit you would have, the loss you would have made in those few years because of the fees would only be 500, compared to making 22 grand nearly in profit in the preceding years. I'd have to do the calculation and work out how much income tax is worth paying just to get the account closed quicker. So as you can see, I mean, it's hard to predict, but in this case, I should really be choosing whatever investment I have with low expectations should go into the SIPP really. So rather than something like Scottish Mortgage, which I expect to do really well, but might have higher risk or higher volatility at least than City of London, for instance. Maybe it's worth putting like the plodders in this portfolio in the SIPP account, so the returns don't completely make this less favourable. As you can see, so when it comes to the profit, as you can see, it's definitely worth it. 20 odd grand, over 20 grand profit should be expected compared to not doing it at all. And as to whether it's let's put in 7%. I've typed in the numbers that get me to an empty balance for close the account at age 76. That's with a 7% return. And as you can see, the AJ Bell and Free Trade numbers are very similar. So it's slightly more expensive with AJ Bell. So it's a tough call as to which one I go with. I mean, actually, I don't think it costs that much. If I've only got 2 or 3 investments, it might cost me 30 quid to transfer from one to the other. So maybe when it reaches this level here, at age 48, 49, if that's how it works out. I could transfer from one to the other, but it doesn't save you that much money. It's only like tenner a year, and then in the very last couple of years, it's cheaper with AJ Bell. Not sure. So yeah, I don't know. What do you reckon? Which provider would you go with? It's hard to say. And of course, they could change the charges at any moment as well, couldn't they? So it's all unpredictable. So I don't know. At the moment, I'm thinking I might go for it. I don't know. It is more money or more assets tied up until I'm 60, though. I've already got the LISA amount that I can't access till I'm 60, and this adds more to that. I mean, theoretically, as this spreadsheet shows, it shouldn't really matter. Even with those numbers, I've still got plenty of money at age 60. I've still got over 200 grand with these numbers, which are quite realistic. I'm spending more than I expect. Reasonable returns. So it shouldn't really matter. I don't know. What do you reckon? Let me know in the comments below. Alright guys, I think that's all I've got to say. Have fun and goodbye.